All righty, Mike. So tell me how the story began and take me back to the very beginning and kind of introduce yourself a little bit at first, just in case if some of my viewers aren't familiar with you.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. Well, I appreciate it, bud. I really appreciate the invite.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate coming on the show. I don't know where you want me to start. I can go all the way back,
Yeah.
or where would
Wherever
you?
you, wherever you feel led to start at, just start
Okay.
there because the more that we can understand the whole picture, the bigger that your testimony is, and we can see where God, because what my point of doing these testimony episodes is that you get faith from reading the Bible. But when you
Mm-hmm.
see faith in action through people's lives, a lot of times when we're going through those same seasons of struggle, that we can pull on that and go, you know what, God was there for Mike. How I
Mm,
can God's going to be here for me. And so I look at it almost like how reading the word, you're just seeing the word come to life in someone's
yeah,
life to find the faith. So anywhere
yeah,
you want to start, you go ahead.
absolutely. Well, I grew up in Rochester, New York. At about 5 years old, my mom and dad got divorced. And about 8 years old, my dad moved away. So I grew up in a single mother home with two other siblings, both of them sisters. And, at the same time, I always felt like there was God's presence. He put my grandfather in my life, an uncle who came to Christ, cousins who came to Christ. So there was a lot of opportunity for God to really minister to an orphan, and
Yeah.
it is interesting, like the scriptures do talk about that, he does have a special heart for orphans
Yes.
and, abandoned individuals. And, Christ himself feeling the abandonment, of his father on the cross. So it, he always seemed to have ministered to me. And I had these ebbs and flows, you know, uh,
Yeah.
I was I grew up basically around a Catholic environment. And then at about 14, somewhere around there, I was introduced to Christ. Um, and in a way that was different than what I was experiencing, in the ritual of the Catholic Church.
Yes, sir.
Um, and so ultimately, I gained this faith that kind of led me throughout the rest of my life. But it ebbed and, as I said, it ebbed and flowed. So, growing up, I just kind of I'd get into these manic stages probably where I'd read my Bible all the time and go to church, and then I would drop off. I'd go to youth group and drop off, and probably a lot of the same dynamic we see in youth today, right?
Yes, sir.
And then at about 18, my family hit a crisis. And the crisis was that my grandfather had a heart attack, and he was the primary breadwinner for most of the family. And so my mom and my stepfather, my grandfather owned that house, and he didn't end up dying, but he was, limited.
Yeah.
And he also at the same time went bankrupt.
Mm.
And so they lost the house. They had to move into an apartment. And I was kind of at 18 left on my own.
Yeah.
Um, and I had dropped out of high school, which was interesting because I was the captain, the only captain voted for the wrestling team going into my senior year of high school.
Oh, wow.
And I had dreams of, wrestling in college and all of that. But it was like everything bottomed out during that summer.
So
And
can I stop you for just a second?
yeah, yeah.
I got to tell you, so this is a battle that I'm personally facing right now. So my son, he is a senior. He is on the wrestling team. He's actually a state champion from last year.
Wow.
And he was supposed to be at regionals. Today's his birthday, and his name is
Okay.
Michael also, which is interesting. But so he was fixing to go to do the regionals 2 days
Hmm.
ago. In practice, goes and tears his MCL, and so now he's having to have surgery. So we're meeting with a surgeon Tuesday,
Okay.
and it's amazing that you're talking about wrestling, and I'm like everything, all the spiritual warfare we had coming up to this, and I'm like, So I think your testimony is going to definitely hit with this. So go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just had to share that
No.
with you because that's a struggle I'm currently facing myself.
Oh yeah. It's and wrestling was for me, my wrestling coach, Bear Art Connerton, he was pretty well known, in the wrestling circles
Yeah.
in upstate New York and actually pretty nationally. But he took me under his wing. He wasn't a Christian influence, but he was a steady influence.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like where I see God's hand in a lot of these things, right? So wrestling for me became like truly a godsend. I got into working out. I got into just the discipline of life. When other kids were going out and, doing drugs and drinking, I was going for a run. I was, what I mean, working out. I was meeting my wrestling partner over the summer and we were just like going at it. And so wrestling became that.
Yeah.
But when that summer came of my senior year and the bottom dropped out, I couldn't. I was looking forward to actually going to Jay Robinson's wrestling camp, which is based out of Minnesota. It was a month-long wrestling camp, but that got canceled because I don't. we had no money.
Yeah.
And what I started doing is I started working, stopped working out, and I started doing drugs. Honestly, I started smoking weed, tripping on acid, drinking all the time, hanging out with the wrong people.
Yeah.
And I ended up just like bottoming out, dropped out of high school. Um, and then I was still partying. And it was that November, I was out with my friends at the time. And a couple of things happened. I had this craving. I was driving up this street, a main strip here in Rochester, New York, and I had this craving for cocaine, and I never did cocaine. It was really odd, and
Wow.
it struck me, and with that Christian upbringing in a way, with that thought process in my mind, I had the thought like there has to be a devil because I have never done cocaine. Where would that come from?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I started thinking. It started me thinking. And I hadn't started going to church again. I took a break. It was a couple year break.
Yeah.
Um, but I was out with a bunch of friends and we ended up tripping on acid. And I was having a bad trip, and the faces around me were turning into creatures, and it was crazy. Like it was the
Wow.
craziest thing. And it got so bad that one of my friends actually at that time, not a friend anymore,
Yeah.
but he handed me a knife and he said, the only way out's for you to kill yourself. And I knew that wasn't the case, you know?
Yeah.
I went on a long walk and I got to this point on the walk and I don't know what it was, but I looked up at this one house and there was a light just flickering. And that light reminded me of Christ. And I prayed and I just said, Jesus, I need you and I need you right now.
Yeah.
And I'll serve you the rest of my life. And I ended up going into the house. I fell asleep. I woke up the next day and I didn't see those people for 25 years. I,
Wow.
yeah, I took off. What happened after that is a couple years later, I ended up getting my GED. And then I decided I had two paths. One, I decided to apply to Calvary Chapel Bible College in what is it, Temecula, I think, or New California.
Okay.
And then I also applied to a local SUNY school, which is State University of New York
Yeah.
College. And so I decided to apply to those two. The Bible college told me I needed more maturity, and the state university let me in. And so I took that as a door
Yeah.
and I went in. Um, and at that time, I didn't finish high school. I was a horrible student in high school. I just had my GED, and this 4-year university actually gave me a shot. I was
Yeah.
22 years old. Prior to that, I was working in factories and different things. It was, I wasn't doing anything I wanted to do. Um, and so at that point, I feel like God just started teaching me how to learn. And so I went to college. Can't say I was entirely faithful the whole time, but at the end of it, God really led me to it. My senior year was when the Twin Towers went down, 9/11 happened. And like many other people, I decided to join the military. So I became a enlisted in military intelligence, went into
Okay.
signals intel, and found myself in San Antonio, Texas, where I hit a bottom and I just was like, this is time. Like, I really began to focus in on my relationship with Christ. And my first day at one of the churches there, uh, this individual who was in the band walked down the steps, came up to me, introduced himself to me. His name was Mike Teague. And from there, like, he said, "Hey, what are you doing after this?" And he said, he invited me over.
Yeah.
So I went over his house. Well, actually, let me back up. He told me his house was near the Golden Corral. I never heard of a Golden Corral. I had
Yeah.
no clue what it was. Up north, we just got one like a few years ago. So I was looking for a bridge or something. I had no clue what it was.
Yeah.
I was like, there must be this Golden Corral. So I'm like looking for like this thing that was gold. And I just kept driving by, driving back. I had no clue it was a restaurant, right? I didn't even see the words.
Yeah.
So I ended up just going back to the barracks. But so the next week he finds me again and he invites me over and he says, just follow me home. so so I followed him home and I'll tell you what, but we would get together every day and I would work overnights or I would work during the day. It was a 12-hour shift. But anytime my shift was over, he'd tell me to come over. And so I went over and he just began to mentor me.
Yeah.
His family became my family. You know, uh, his house literally became like my second house. We'd stay up till 3 in the morning. He'd walk me through the whole of scripture,
That's
giving me
amazing.
the understanding of like God's eternal purpose for me. And it was just amazing. The
Yeah.
discipleship was amazing. And then he introduced me to other people and the camaraderie and the brotherhood. It was everything I was looking for, that I didn't have fully as a kid, that in my 20s, it was amazing. Um, but any questions so far up to
Yeah.
this
So,
point?
so God's already, you're seeing where God is going and actually putting people into your life
Yes.
and is directing you. And I'm gonna just tag on to this because this is something. So I was going through a discipleship course about 2 months ago, and in
Hmm.
that, one of the biggest takeaways I had is something that I've been trying to put into my life, not just with my spiritual walk, but also business. And what it was stating is to be like Paul. So Paul had Timothy, so he would
Hmm.
teach Timothy. And with what you're talking about, this sounds a lot like this. So you, in your life, with spiritual walk, business, or anything you're trying to learn, or that you're trying to walk in, you have to have a Paul, someone that's wiser than you are and a little bit
Yeah.
older, and then you have to have a Timothy, someone that's underneath you that you can teach. So that way, when you run across a problem that you don't fully have the answers to, you can then go to your Paul and talk it over, have that wisdom come down, and then but then when you're teaching it, you're then re-edifying it in yourself and learning it in a different way.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that God was putting this principle into your life already.
Oh, yeah. 100%. 100%.
And also, I have to throw this out there. So my brother's also intelligence currently. So yeah, like,
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, the military, really living out my faith in the military was something that, was pretty incredible.
yeah,
I had a 6-month deployment out to Korea. And, a lot of people go there with great intentions. I heard a lot about how, the godly men that I knew around me at times when their faith bottomed out, in the military, it happened in Korea because you're away. You don't
Yeah.
have to worry about anything. Nobody's keeping track of you. And I was determined at that time not to let that happen.
Yeah.
And so I actually started uh, I guess at that time, it was more of a newsletter. We didn't really have blogs per se yet.
Right.
They were
Yeah.
maybe just starting, but I would write one and I would send it out weekly on an email chain to those at church. And
Yeah.
I would just tell them what I was doing and stuff like that. And so I began working within the ministry out there. And then I would just like travel around, and God really kept his hand on me that I didn't get into any trouble. I actually was able to lead Bible studies in the jail out there.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was really great stuff.
So let me ask you
So,
this because one of the things that talking to my brother, because he's been to Syria and he's been
mhm.
to, I think he went to Korea and he's been to like three different countries. One thing that we talk about a lot because, with my podcast, we kind of focus on also the spiritual warfare of things.
Yep.
What I have found from talking to other people is that there seems to be principalities that are in charge of different continents. Was
Hmm.
that something that you experienced while you were over there? Could you tell a spiritual difference with that country because of, and it's, sometimes they say it's the principality, sometimes they say it's just because of the religions that are in that culture and then the difference in the upbringing, but did you experience any of that?
What I did experience? No. Um, what I would say I did experience is that the Christians have a different mentality out there than a lot of Christians here. They are very sincere and I'm not saying Americans aren't
Yeah.
sincere, but it's different. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
they have right above them, North Korea. They have family members who they at that time they still had people who they knew were over there when the split took place.
Yes, sir.
You know what I mean? They had different experiences. They had people who were running from China and North Korea, and they were running into, South. They were literally like grabbing them, getting them, like, uh, you know, in really helping them across the border
Yeah.
to some way in some ways. And there were books written about the cannibalism that takes place in North Korea. There was so much that because of the starvation and stuff like that. So what I saw there was this, like when they were faithful to Christ, like it was like nothing I had experienced before. And the close proximity of people to one another, and it's very tight spaces.
Yeah.
um but no, the principalities and powers, you know I think where I experienced that the most, honestly, but in Rochester, like
Really?
where I live, like there's I was talking a few years ago, I was talking to a friend. There is a depressive slash um I guess seductive spirit that I think hangs over Rochester.
Yeah.
Like a lot of like the pastors and different, I've seen many of them who just like fall into some form of sexual sin. There's just it's pretty wild,
Yeah, it
honestly.
is.
How that works.
It's something with you saying that, even with it being here in the United States, I was talking to another friend of mine, and he was talking about like with fentanyl. If you
Mm.
look at certain places, because I believe it was Chicago was where he was from, and he was
Hmm.
talking about how he had moved over here to North Carolina, and how the city he came from, he could literally tell a difference in the people, not just because of the drug, but just how their personalities were, and there was a different. He was saying that when he moved south, he noticed people they were evil but with like good intent. And he goes, what I mean with that is he goes, you guys will go and say, bless your heart, and you're really not meaning bless your heart. He goes,
Yeah.
where he was from, you would see it acted out more into the public and into the
Hmm.
streets, just kind of more blatant. So that's
Yes.
interesting for you to say that.
Yeah, I would say I know that bless your heart really well,
Yeah.
from my friends who are in Atlanta and then the ones who I knew in San Antonio. That was a thing. It's exactly true.
Yeah.
That there's, I think up north, It's just very much like, yeah, don't talk to me about that stuff. I
Yep.
don't care about that. Whereas down south, they'll listen to you and they'll politely shut you down. You know what I mean? So I
Yes,
think that
sir.
that's the difference.
100%. So after Korea, let's jump
Hmm.
back into your story. So after Korea,
Yeah.
what happened?
Yeah. After Korea, I ended up getting married. I met my wife in Texas, my ex-wife now, but in Texas. And she had, she had a son and a daughter when I married her. And then we had two on our own. So
Yeah.
we had a total of four that were growing up in the house. We were together for about 15 years. And that's really where, like, in that time frame, I ended up going to seminary. So I got a master's of divinity. I got ordained in an Anglican church. So
Yeah.
I was in an Anglican church. I was a deacon. I had thought I was going to go into full-time like pastoral ministry, but I ended up becoming a recruiter, loving business, and really seeing my role in the world as one, as a diaconate in a
Yeah.
way that's like both and, right? Like in the world, but not of the world, but
Yes.
also presenting, as a recruiter, one thing I found is that uh, I love doing the work of recruiting because I feel like I'm improving the lives of others around me,
Yeah.
which is very much the ability it opens the door for the ability for kingdom work. On LinkedIn, people see I went to, I got a master's of divinity. People see I went to seminary.
Yeah.
They also see I have a master's in management and leadership, so they see those things. And so it really, when the Christians on LinkedIn reach out and I'm interviewing them and stuff like that, they bring it up and I have an opportunity to talk to them, and encourage one another. On
Yeah.
the other side, I have the ability to help families get into better space, financially and different things, which, I think enables, the economy, it enables our country, it enables people in their lives to grow.
Yeah.
But also the way I impact people there is how I do things. It's not just what I do, but it's how I do it. And I think that's for everybody, right? So,
100%. Yeah, I totally agree with that because you're not just hitting them spiritually, you're also physically trying to make their lives better. And I think that's a
yes.
very important role that we have because sometimes as church people, I call it either Christianese or we
Hmm.
start trying to speak certain language that only the church will understand. We're not actually being active enough in the community. And if
Yep.
you look, Jesus was always active with the community. He went out to the sinners. And one of the things I think we see a lot, which this is, I very much so honor with what you're doing with this
Mm.
because a lot of times as a church, we're trying to get people to come in, come in, come in, come in. A lot of
Right.
times you got to go meet those people where they're at.
Correct.
And so with the way that you're approaching that, I think is 100% the right way to do that.
Yeah, and it really does, like, I get a lot of people saying like I've never had a recruiter treat me like this, or like this is fantastic, or you've done a great job. I mean, I do have my retractors too, right?
Yeah.
Like people
Yeah.
who, if they don't get, a lot of times if people don't get the job, they'll say garbage, right?
Yeah.
But generally though, it's not because of the way I've treated them. You know what I mean? Like they can't because I've treated them well. So I do, in that regard, I just embraced the work that I was doing. I've enjoyed it, but there's always been this spiritual component about it that I think you know the work of God in the world is way bigger
Oh yeah.
than just the church. You know what I mean? Since we are the church, people are impacted. I think. Uh, and here's the funny thing: at work, I'm like, I work remotely,
Hmm.
but whenever anyone's going through an issue, guess who they call?
Yeah.
And it's not because they know I'm a pastor. Like I had um, a coworker who was going through some severe issues. Now she grew up in a preacher's home and all of that, right?
Yeah.
And she had ended up getting into a situation that wasn't great for her. And she's like, I don't know. Do you have a second, Mike? I was like, yeah. And she didn't know I had a master's of divinity. She didn't know I had been ordained. She didn't know any of that stuff, right, bud? So she calls me and she's like, I just feel like I have to tell you what's going on in my life. And I'm like, cool, you're in a safe space. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And I kind of bind myself to the pastoral, aspect to where, you know what, I'm bound to this oath that what you tell me, I'm not going to go tell anybody else.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because the confession or the interaction is sacred for both us, for each other, but
Oh yeah.
also for God. Like God has opened that space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's what I do at work. It's fun.
But that's awesome because it's your area of operation. You're bringing Christ. You're doing the work that He wants us to do because we're supposed to go out and make disciples. And
Yes.
sometimes that's just as simply checking on someone. Because I mean, we stand out, and a lot of times people can see something is different by just the way you hold yourself, by the way that you care, by the way you
Yeah.
act. Because our focus is not strictly just on this world. We have our
Right.
mind and our faith and our hope in Jesus Christ. And so when you can actually take that and put it into an actionable situation, you shine through. And it's not you that's shining, it's Christ.
Oh
And so
yeah.
that's an amazing job. Like truly, I
Thank
like
you.
that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just who we are,
Yeah.
right? It's just who we are. And, so anyway, we were married for, 15 years. Um, and what precipitated like our divorce was I had found out that she was cheating on me. And it was for the majority of the marriage.
Mm.
And I had feelings, like I had thoughts, and you know, I we have a thing that's called betrayal blindness. Our um, our system itself kind of doesn't allow us to see what's actually going on because it would harm us,
Yeah.
and so it kind of shuts down. And betrayal blindness does that. And whenever I did though confront or mention something that I seemed off,
Yeah.
um, I was always shut down or gaslit, or so I really like um, throughout the marriage I was gaslit. And I had the nice guy mentality that I think a lot of times, to be honest with you, we try to be like Christ and we don't understand what that means in the
Yes.
church, especially in America, I think. And sometimes it's just the nice guy syndrome.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But there's an aspect of grace and truth that I think we need to live into, and which my betrayal, taught me
Yeah.
about. And so throughout, so we were married 15 years, around COVID, right before COVID, actually, going into 2020, I had just negotiated a $40,000 increase in pay.
Wow.
We were, yeah, we were, yeah, exactly. I mean, God was really moving me in my growth in my career. Like I had joined this global consulting firm as a recruiter. Like we were on the up and up. We
Yeah.
sat down with real estate agents. We were looking to move because we lived in the city. We wanted to get the kids into a better school district. All of that stuff. Well, the day that it's actually tomorrow, is tomorrow, 6 years ago
Yeah.
is when I discovered everything.
Mm.
And so, what had happened was, and I hope you don't mind me going into this, it's
Nah,
part
go
of my
for it.
story,
Yeah, no,
honestly.
no, no, go for it. Because
Um,
I'll be honest, so I went through a divorce myself, and I
okay.
know how this can spiral into hopelessness. So yes,
Oh,
please share.
I will. So, I ended up, she had asked me to, if she could go hang out with one of these women from church.
Yeah.
And often what I found out is what she would do is she would say she was going to a church event with the women and piggyback.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She'd go hang out with this person
That way
or
she's
people.
not directly lying and she can
Yes,
make it okay in her head. Yes, I understand.
exactly, exactly. And so, and I don't want to make this, I try not to bash her. I mean, but the because ultimately it's what God has done in me. You know
Yes.
what I mean? Like it's horrible circumstances, horrible decision making on her part, but it ultimately comes down to what has God done in me?
Yep.
You know what I mean? To help me grow. And So anyways, it was, the 15th of February, 2020. COVID hadn't happened yet. It was happening in China, but it hadn't gotten here,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm with the kids at the YMCA. We get home. It's like 10 o'clock. She'd gone out at like 4 p.m. and I hadn't heard from her.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that's weird. Usually I'd hear from her. And so I ended up like looking on what I'd never done this before, but I went on Google Maps and I was like, well, where the heck is she? So I look and I'm like, that's weird. She was in a location that wasn't in, in my purview of understanding of where she was going to be.
Yeah.
So I was like, let me check last week. For some reason, I had this gut feeling, right?
Yeah.
And the one thing I kept doing throughout our marriage was when I'd get these gut feelings, I would mention something and then it would be like, no, that's not true. And so then I would believe her. So I had like these Garden of Eden moments, right?
Yeah.
Did God really say, like when God's giving
Yep.
discernment or giving words of knowledge, did God, you'll have that enemy come into your mind, but that's what it was like over and over again. Finally, I was like, no, I'm going to listen to this. Let me go with this. So I went back the week before. She was at the same spot. I said, well, she was out the week before that. Okay. Huh. She's at the same spot. So I call. She doesn't answer. She texts me and she says she's at some restaurant. I said, that's garbage. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You're not at there. You're at, you're in Chilai at this place. That's a town over here.
Okay.
And I ultimately I confronted her and she ultimately admits it. Um and I immediately like hyperventilate and like all the stuff that I was thinking came true.
Yep.
And the point is, Bud, is that I grew up in a home where that happened to my mom. And I had promised that it would never happen in my marriage and it would never happen to my children. They wouldn't grow up without their father around. They wouldn't grow up in a split home. And now all of that was crumbling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I tried to stay in it for 18 months, but she was cheating with various people. I kept finding new things. I kept verifying the things of the past. Like it
Mm.
was crazy, like everything I was discovering.
Yeah.
It was like D-Day every day,
Yeah.
it was nuts. And so for about 18 months, and then uh, I had we'd gone on vacation. So we pretended here and there, right?
Yeah.
So we went on vacation to her sister's house. And this was the final straw for me. 18 months in, um, we were on vacation. We went on a date night. She even put her like wedding ring on for the first time in almost 2 years. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is weird. Like
So
my body,
was she actually trying to make it work, do you think? Or do you
no,
think she was
no.
just flipping back and forth?
She's flipping back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah.
She had me in limbo. It was that
Gotcha.
limbo.
Mhm.
And so what ended up happening was uh, I just we went on a date night. She was holding my hand at the beach, all this kind of stuff. We were actually in North Carolina
Oh, really?
and right outside of Virginia Beach.
Okay.
And so we were at her sister's house. And then I just got this weird feeling. And so I looked on her phone and there were like the same guy from the very beginning she talked to that morning. So she wasn't stopping.
Yeah.
And I ended up just like leaving vacation. I went home. I called a mediator. I got a lawyer and a financial coach to help me with my mediation because, I knew if I was going to go through this
Yep.
for a guy in New York, I'm going to get crushed, you know?
Yeah, it's like that here too. It's like
Yeah, the no fault divorce, you know what
Yep.
I mean? So anyways, make a long story short, um, I ended up like through the process, there was again just kind of like my faith bottomed out. I ended up resigning from my house wasn't in order. I ended up just resigning from my ordination, and I never lost that nugget of faith,
Right.
but I just didn't know what to do with God. And a lot of betrayed people, a lot of divorced people, they go through that stuff. I'm not sure if you did,
I
but
did, and then the other thing I had was also me feeling like because I mean biblically, you're not supposed to be divorced and then try to be a pastor. And
right.
I struggled with that so heavily. It's interesting because the story actually lines up with I'd gone through a divorce, but it's been over 12 years ago. But I
Yeah.
dealt with the ramifications of that, and I'd even gotten remarried,
Hmm.
but I still had it on the inside. And I
Mm.
kept talking to God, and I didn't feel like I was good enough. Not that God pulled away from me, but something in me had pulled away from God. And I felt
Yeah.
like I had that sin there that was in between me and God.
Yes.
And actually, it was around the same time that you're talking. It was actually February 12th of 2020. My mother had passed away,
Oh,
and we
wow.
were having a celebration of life at my house, and I was supposed
Mm.
to be actually kind of hosting it and talking. I was looking up some verses, and I found the verse, which I don't have it right here in front of me, but it talks about with divorce that God will eventually forgive you. And I
Mm.
was like, that's unique because I'd never seen that where it said eventually.
Mm.
And this bombarded me the entire time through my mom's ceremony that I ended up having to get my brother to speak.
Wow.
But God used that to get me back 100% studying that word and
Yeah.
then started chipping away at my heart. And over the
Mm.
next 3 or 4 years, God totally rebuilt me with who I was and my relationship with Him. And I don't want
Yeah.
to say that I got away from God because I've always feared God,
Yes.
but and it started with that divorce because it was like my foundation got broke and
Hmm.
then I allowed that to be my central focus instead of putting God first. And because of that, it put almost, I guess you could call it a veil in between me and his relationship. And
Yep.
so, yes, I fully understand. And my heart goes out to you with going through that situation because I faced it myself. And that's one of the reasons why, when I was reading over everything, when you were talking about coming on, I was like, yes, I would like to hear this because I believe there's a lot of people currently that when they go through the divorce, some
Hmm.
people run to God, but
Yeah.
then there's others that when you're already close to God, that you feel like this is now something that's come between you and Him.
Hmm.
And it takes time to work out, but it does eventually work out because it's
Yep.
not who God is who you are and how you're viewing the situation. Would you agree
That's
with
right.
that?
100%. And I think it's funny because I have a podcast. It's the Brilliant Life podcast. And
Yeah.
I talk about my story of betrayal because I've started a business called the Brilliant Life Collective. And ultimately, my goal is to work with men for divorce recovery and betrayal recovery. And so, to do that in a way that really focuses in on rebuilding from what I call the rubble.
Mm.
Like, and I look at that like ground zero
Yep.
is not a place where we just, really focus in on in terms of like looking at it from just a place of like where a demolition took place, but a place of rebuilding. So, this is how I got there with that kind of thought. When you're reading through the scripture, you would see like the Bible talks about the heads wagging of the enemy saying, "Oh, look at Jerusalem, it's destroyed, it's all of that," right?
Yeah.
But when you look at what is really going on, it wasn't God destroying without purpose. It was God destroying for rebuilding. And when you look at like the destruction of the Son of God,
Yeah.
right, on the cross, it was ultimately resurrection. And
Dude.
so what God is doing is he's not sitting there saying, what do we do? Like, I can't believe this happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what he's saying is, are you going to trust me to help you resurrect? Because that's ultimately the purpose of God. The eternal purpose of God is that we would be created into the image of his dear son.
Yep.
Like, that's the goal, right? And
Yeah.
so the goal of that is that me has to be destroyed. I have to be destroyed. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to go through a divorce or that everybody
Right.
has to go through something horrible. We don't. Like it doesn't it doesn't necessitate um it, going to the nth degree of what happened to me. It does necessitate though humility of coming out of it, of giving over to God, of saying to Christ, you here's my hand, guide me. You know what
Yes.
I mean? And saying, pull me out of here. And it's truly a mind shift and a mental shift and a heart change. What the goal of each of my podcasts is to bring people, and I got this, Jesus talks about it. Obviously, it's the that metanoia, that ability to, renewal of the mind, that repentance, that change.
Yeah.
But the big book of AA, they talk about the psychic change. And that's essentially what they're talking about in there is the born again experience,
Yes.
right? And so my goal in all of my work and all of my podcasts is to change people as they're listening, right? It's the goal of that because God did that to me.
Yeah.
Like that's what's happened in me. And so it was funny because this morning I actually last night I recorded my podcast and I got it all edited and I put it out last evening and everything like that. And I felt like something was missing. I
Yeah.
was like, something's not quite right. And so, I work with Claude and stuff like that, right? On AI tool.
Yeah.
And so it knows me. I have questions it asks me, like everything like that. It, but it was missing that. It was missing the gospel. It was missing where's God in this? Where's the gospel in this? Where's that psychic change? You
Yep.
know what I mean? And so I took all of my transcriptions of my other podcasts, I put them into Claude, and I said, something's missing, and I think it's this. And man, we went through this morning, early this morning, like 5 a.m., right?
Yeah.
Redoing it. So I re recorded it all this morning and I put it back out. And I sent it to my fiance, and she was like, oh, that's it right there. That's it. you know, but
That's
I say
awesome.
that to say, like, um, the goal of, I think, our lives
Yes, sir.
is to give people the opportunity to have that psychic change. And sometimes, we are examples in Christ of how people, and this is why you do testimonies, right?
Yep. It is.
This is what we want to do here. We want to see people change. And, you know, um, we want to see people change in their seats right now.
Yeah.
you know?
S- So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
During this process, going back to your story,
Yeah.
when did you see you call it psychic change? When did you see that in yourself? And what brought you across understanding this and experiencing that?
Yeah. Good question. Uh, there were different points along the way,
Yeah.
but ultimately I had a heart attack.
Mm.
I was in the hospital. I didn't, I talked about this as well in my podcast, but, and I've written about it, but ultimately, um, it, it was in December, what, 4 years, 3 years ago, hold on, 2022, December 2022. So almost 4 years ago. Um, and I went to the hospital because I had like heartburn, but I work out all the time. I did CrossFit. I know my body
Yeah.
and I didn't get heartburn. And it was just really odd. Like the whole thing was really weird. And I woke up at 3 a.m. and it was just like I went downstairs, drank some water and stuff, and like went back to bed. Woke up at 8 o'clock. I'm a five, 6. Between 5 and 6, I
Yeah.
rise on my own. And I woke up at 8 o'clock, like a Mack truck hit me, and I was like, "This is weird. I must be getting sick." But
Yeah.
then I had that issue, and I would drink my coffee and all of that, and tried to like dissipate the pain. And it wasn't like any elephant sitting on my chest. It was like real. You ever go running outside in the real cold weather
Oh, yeah.
where you breathe in the cold air
And
and it
it
makes
has a
like,
your lungs burn and almost like your
yes,
whole chest hurt. Yeah.
that's it right there.
Gotcha.
But to the like 1,000 times more. And so I ended up going to the hospital and, it was COVID protocol still here in New York. They kept that all the way up until probably last year or 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. So nobody could be in the emergency room with me. So I was making phone calls, but I texted my children as if it was going to be the last text that they ever received from me, that they could keep it with them the rest of their lives. Like I was literally getting ready to die. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't wanting to die, but it was it
You
was
were
severe.
preparing. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so, anyways, make a long story short, I ended up getting a stent. Actually, I have 3 stents. But I ended up at that time getting, one. And then the beginning of the weekend, and then at the end of the weekend, I got another one because they wait 2 days for the next one.
Yeah.
But it was literally laying in the bed. I go to a Catholic priest for spiritual direction.
Yeah.
Him and I've been going to him for 10 years. He has been, I mean, he listens to Alistair Begg. Like he's a different, like, he's
Yeah.
great.
He's a different breed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like very gospel centered, you
Yeah.
know. But when I was going through the worst of it, he was like Christ to me. Literally, I swear, when he hugged me, when I told him about everything at the very beginning, he hugged me, and it was like he's a short little Irish guy from New York City, like deep New York Bronx accent, like just, you know, but short and
Yeah.
small. But when he hugged me, when I was weeping, it was like this extended like arms. It was crazy. Like it was like Christ hugging me.
Yeah.
It was amazing. But so he came up and visited me. My ex-wife came up and she visited me. Um, but what I saw taking place, that metanoia, that that psychic change was in that hospital bed where I just knew it was the anger in my body that was going to destroy me. They say it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to be harmed.
Yeah.
That's what, bitterness and rage against others and all that kind of stuff is. Um and literally that's what was happening. So when I left when I went into that hospital, I was a dead man. When I came out, I was resurrected. And from that point on, like it was funny because who's the woman who's my fiance now, we had met on an app. Uh, and so we were texting back and forth and for about 3 weeks leading up to my heart attack. And the day I'm having my heart attack, I'm sitting in the emergency room and I get a message from her, and she says, "Well, it's probably time that you and I start texting on our phones or talking on our phones." And she gave me her phone number. That day, I'm in the hospital.
Wow.
And so it was crazy. Um, and then she didn't hear from me for like a week.
Yeah.
So she thought it was like done. So I ended up messaging her later, but she's a nurse practitioner. I mean, like she's the sweetest person that I've ever met,
Yeah.
and it was just like my life. We did a Tough Mudder together. We've done two half marathons together. We do Peloton together. You know what I mean? Like we go to
Yeah.
church together, like we pray together. It's a everything I wanted in my first relationship, with my ex-wife. It's like I don't know, God's building it back better, like Job, like
Yes,
on the
sir.
other side of it. So to get back to that question, that's where it started. That's where the anger started going away. That's where I began to really say, I've got a second chance at life.
Yeah.
Um, and I know God saved me for a purpose. And I'm going to be bold with that purpose. And I'm going to be loving with that purpose. And I'm going to be intentional with that purpose. And I'm going to be the hands and feet of Christ in environments that
Amen,
others won't
brother.
go, you know?
Amen. Like 100%.
So,
So, with this whole story, the one thing I want to do also is why would any of my viewers want to come over and pop into your podcast? And what is like a little outlook of what they could learn, or kind of leave us on a cliffhanger if you might?
yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, honestly, like if I'm the type of person who I incorporate um, a lot of different things. Like I'm definitely Christ-centered, but I like to read across things. I
Yeah.
like to read politics. I mean, I'm a history, political science undergrad. I'm a master's in divinity. I'm also a master's in management and leadership. And I also have a global talent management certification.
Wow.
And so I try to think through things in a way that is biblical, but also like how does the Bible today apply in this particular situation? And I think ultimately we're all going to end up in a crisis at some point.
Yes.
And so, what I think my podcast does, yes, it's aimed towards men who are going through betrayal or divorce recovery, but it's also for anybody who's been through a crisis, who's, a lot of people say you're either, you just got out of a crisis, you're going into a crisis, or you're in the midst of a crisis.
I was actually in a phone call earlier just saying that. So yeah, I was like, it's funny for you to bring that up
Yeah,
because I live
exactly.
by that.
So I think that's what, and there how I look at things all the time. I listen to all different types of things.
Yeah,
And you eat the meat and you spit out the bones. I think there's going to be something for everybody, for women as well. Um, but ultimately, if you are a man and you're going through betrayal, if you're going through crisis, of any sort, I think it would be good to hear how to think through things. And maybe it's not just the principle itself, but maybe it's the pattern of thought of how do you get from one spot to the next. Maybe there's steps along the way, and we can learn from anybody.
I
So,
think you are so right with that because that's something that I think your thought process on everything influences your outcome. Because if
yes.
you start taking a small step in the wrong direction, even though it's not less, I'm not even talking about sinful, I'm just saying in the wrong direction,
Yeah.
and you keep building on those steps, you're going to lead somewhere totally different than if you have the right way of thinking about it. And so,
Yes.
yeah, that's deep, and that is some true world and life changing, mind altering decision making that can influence everything. Um, so this will be my last question for you.
Okay.
If someone is currently going through a crisis or going through a divorce, and you
Mhm.
have a minute, 2 minutes to actually say something to them that you think would change their entire life, what would that be?
You're in a construction site, you're not in a destruction zone. And what you do now will enable you to become all that you've always wanted to become in the future. You have an opportunity to take steps today that will lead you down the path, as we were just talking about, that'll lead you down the road in a way that when you look back, that you'll say, you know what, I did that well. I didn't do it perfect, but I did it well. The other thing I would want you to know, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be in pain. And it's okay if you have like the grieving process, it's not cyclical, right? There's not this step, this step, this step. We like to define it that way, but you may have an amazing day at the very beginning, but then when you're getting towards the end of these cycles, you might have the worst day of your life.
Yeah,
But because it's not linear, it goes in ebbs and flows. And ultimately, whatever you're going through, I always tell my kids this, I tell myself this, when the crisis starts, you're walking out of the door of stability and you think you're walking into instability, but you're actually stepping onto the hand of the God who created all things. So
amen.
allow yourself to fall and free fall into his hands because what you ultimately get will be better than if you shun his hand and try to take over yourself. That's what I would say.
Wow. And that right there, yeah, that's the point. And that is amazing. That is truly amazing with the way you stated it. And where can everybody find you at?
Yeah, so you can find, I just discovered TikTok, so Brilliant Life Collective without the E at TikTok. You can find me at Brilliant Life Collective on Facebook. You can also find me on Instagram, Brilliant Life Collective there. You can also use my name, Mike Moulton. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram there as well. But also brilliantlifecollective.com. You can go there. Or I can send you this too. It's Mike at brilliantlifecollective.com. It's
Yeah,
pretty
please do.
simple. Everything's brilliantlifecollective.com.
Awesome. And may I encourage you to write a book?
Thank you.
I would definitely read it, and I would love
Really?
to add it to my collection. Yes. So please, and that's something that we can talk about after the show if you're ever interested in it.
Yeah, I'm
But
actually 2026. I told my fiance, I said I want to have a book out by the end of
so
2026.
I've written 32, so I can show
Have you
you how.
really?
Yeah.
Please, let's do it.
Yeah, cool. Most definitely. Brother, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you again for
Yeah.
coming on, and I would love for you to come back at some point.
Yeah, yeah. Let me know anytime. And I'd love to hear your story of recovery
Yes,
through
sir.
your divorce. I'm actually going to start an interview process and program additional to my podcast. So I'm going to have the more of the solo podcast once a week, but I'm also going to do interviews twice a month.
Oh
So
yeah, most definitely. I'd be down for that.
awesome.
Cool.
Well,
A- All right. Thank you again.
yeah. Thank you, bud. I
All right. Have a
appreciate your
blessed
time.
day.
The only thing I'll ever say about the devil is this. He keeps trying me. I'm not worried. Yeah, he whispers lies in the dark of night. Tries to shake my faith, tries to steal my sight. Brings up my past like it owns my name. But he's fighting battles that he already lost in flames. Chains on the ground where they used to be. Cross on the hill screaming victory. Every accusation, every doubt falls apart when I open my mouth. I don't fight for the win, I stand in it. The war was finished before my first breath, before my first sin. Jesus defeated him before I was ever born. Jesus defeated him before I was ever born. Before I walked, before I ran, before the storm. He keeps trying me, but I'm not afraid. My victory was sealed at the grave. Already defeated, already done. The battle was over when the sun said it's won. Already defeated, say it again. I don't fight the devil, I stand with him. He's a liar with the fading crown. All that noise, just a hollow sound. Tries to flex like he's in control, but he can't touch what God made whole. I don't wrestle fear, I speak truth. Blood was poured out, proof is proof. Every knee gonna hit the floor. Name of Jesus, undefeated roar. I don't fight for the win, I stand in it. Hell was conquered before my first breath, before my first sin. Jesus defeated him before I was ever born. Jesus defeated him before I was ever born. Death couldn't hold him, the stone was torn. He keeps trying me, but I'm not afraid. My victory was sealed at the grave. Already defeated, already done. The battle was over when the sun said it's won. Already defeated, say it again. I don't fight the devil, I stand with him. No fear, no shame, no chains, no grave. By the blood, by the name we overcome, proclaim. No fear, no shame, no chains, no grave. By the blood, by the name we overcome, proclaim. No fear, no chains, no grave. He keeps trying me, trying me, trying me. He keeps trying me, trying me, trying me. He keeps trying me, trying me, trying me. He keeps trying me, but I'm not worried. Jesus defeated him before I was ever born.